So it's official. The dark trio of shonen, oh no, he hates my content voice, have now all got their own anime. But what am I talking about when I say the words the dark trio? Well, the dark trio of shonen refers to three relatively current mangas: Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, and the final one, Hell's Paradise. Now, Jujutsu Kaisen was the first out of the dark trio to get an anime adaptation, with Chainsaw Man following suit, and as of about a week and a half ago, Hell's Paradise finally getting its own anime adaptation. Now, the reason that these three manga are referred to as the dark trio is because, comparatively to other shonen, they're very dark. Now, I don't mean in terms of the lighting they use, I mean in terms of the tones they cover. All three manga are not afraid to kill off side or main characters, there is an insane amount of violence, and the themes explored in these dark trio of manga are significantly deeper and more adult than your average shonen. When it comes to shonen, these are about as close to seinen as you'll get. And honestly, Hell's Paradise is my favorite out of the three, but it is also, unfortunately, probably the least popular out of the three, probably mostly due to the fact that it hasn't had an anime like Chainsaw Man and JJK until now. But this manga has been around for a while. In fact, the manga's already over. It is 127 absolutely insanity-packed chapters. However, unfortunately for the average reader, but not unfortunately for people like me who make a living off explaining anime, there is a lot packed into those 127 chapters. And because of that, people often get weighed down in the universe of Hell's Paradise. As it's based in feudal Japan and therefore there's a myriad of historical references, there's a unique and interesting power system that's very akin to Naruto's power system, not to mention that the entire premise of the manga is based around Buddhist and Taoist beliefs, which means that your average reader of Hell's Paradise is not only grappling with a time period they're unfamiliar with, but religions they're unfamiliar with while trying to figure out the power system of a complex universe. And it can lead to a bit of information overload. But fortunately for you, I exist, and I've made it my entire personality to overanalyze the ever-living hell out of every anime and manga I've ever consumed in order to explain it to the masses. And you better believe I just reread the entirety of Hell's Paradise over the last 2 days in order to do exactly that, which has made me realize more than anything just how much I love this manga. And if you're thinking about picking up the anime, then I want to put you in the best possible position to enjoy it, which is why today we're covering Hell's Paradise, specifically everything you need to know before picking it up. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn about one of the craziest universes in all of manga. But before we get to learning about anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. And if you love hearing about brand new anime, then you're gonna love my brand new anime podcast that I'm doing with Gabimaru, where me and Danny break down everything that happened in anime this week. Hell's Paradise, very much included. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So Hell's Paradise, the story about criminals being sent to what is perceived as paradise to find the elixir of everlasting life. A premise that on the surface seems relatively simple. 10 or so prisoners battle it out on an island covered with terrifying monsters in order to find immortality. And while if you look at Hell's Paradise as just that much, it is a relatively simple concept. But it's kind of like looking at a black hole and thinking, that thing sucks. So today I want to give you a slightly more detailed rundown on what the plot of the story is, introduce you to and explain the powers of the main characters of at least what will be the first 24 episodes, because it's kind of a revolving door, and then briefly, and I mean very briefly, touch on how the power system of this universe works, as explaining Tan and Tao and how the Doshi's powers work is an entire video in itself. So we're gonna start this video off in the way that we tend to start these kinds of videos off, at the beginning. Like I've already established, this manga is completed. It's 127 chapters, and the chapters are very long, so it ends up being roughly around 250 or 300 or so regular sized chapters, as the average chapter ends up being somewhere around 40 pages. And considering the fact that episode 1 only covered chapter 1 of the manga, there's probably going to be somewhere around 127 episodes, putting Hell's Paradise somewhere in the MHA range of episodes. And considering the fact that MHA came out in 2016 and won't be done until at least 2024, that means Hell's Paradise will probably be running somewhere around 8 to 10 years. So you got a while to jump on the bandwagon. And like I've already touched on, Hell's Paradise is part of the dark trio, and it is arguably the darkest out of all of them. So if you're not into gore and nudity and incredibly dark and heavy themes, it's probably not for you. However, if you're looking for an anime that is gorgeously animated that invokes berserk levels of violence, then You're gonna love it. Now, we've already very briefly touched on the idea of the plot, but let's take one step further into our descriptive era and actually get into the meat of what this story is about. See, the story revolves around a ninja by the name of Gabimaru. Not Zabimaru, Renji Zenpakuto, Gabimaru with a G. Oh, Lao G would have been proud of me there. That's 3 separate anime references in 3 clips. God, I feel bad for anybody trying to keep up at home. Gabimaru hails from a ninja village, specifically the Stone Village, also known in Japanese as Iwagakure, just like the Iwa of Naruto. Except in this universe, it's relevant, as it breeds some of the strongest ninjas in the world. However, where Gabimaru comes from, the Stone Village isn't the only place that ninjas are bred. It's just known for how intensive their ninja training is, and therefore how effective the ninjas they create are. And Gabimaru is the greatest ninja they currently have, outside of the village leader. See, Gabimaru's parents were both ninjas. However, they tried to leave the Hidden Stone Village when they had Gabimaru. And because you're not allowed to leave the village elder and other ninjas killed his parents, and therefore Gabimaru came under the care of the village leader. And while this might sound like it makes the village leader a super nice guy who's willing to bring in an orphan, he's not. The village leader is a somewhat immortal, incredibly creepy looking deity type leader who doesn't allow anybody who's been trained up as a ninja to ever leave the life of being a ninja. And for a long time, Gabimaru was an incredible ninja, and a lot of his strength came from his apathy, as Gabimaru could slay an entire room filled with women and children and feel nothing. And because of this, Gabimaru got the nickname Gabimaru the Hollow. Once again, not a Bleach reference. However, because Gabimaru was such an effective assassin and because the village leader liked him so much, he married off his first daughter to Gabimaru. And you might be thinking, "Aw, so cute." And I mean, to a certain degree, it kind of is. Gabimaru's wife, Yui, tries to live a relatively normal life. She's cheery and kind and dedicates herself to turning Gabimaru back into the human that he was born as. But because she's trying to live a normal life in a very abnormal place like the Hidden Stone Village, her father seared her face with a hot iron to remind her that she is not normal and that she will never live a normal life. However, Gabimaru, being the man's man that he is, loves her, scars and all. And Yui slowly but surely fills in the hollow space that was Gabimaru's heart, to the point where Gabimaru decides that he's done with ninja work and that he wants to live honestly with Yui. However, like I said, village elder, not a great guy. And next thing that Gabimaru knows is being jumped by a bunch of other ninja. Gabimaru is placed in custody of a local feudal lord whose men Gabimaru has killed 20 or so of, and Gabimaru is awaiting execution. But nobody can kill him because his body is too hardened through his ninja training. It's at this point that Gabimaru meets Sigiri, an Asaimon from the Yamada clan. See, the Asaimon are a clan of people dedicated to executing people. They are Japan's executioners. And Sigiri, upon realizing that Gabimaru doesn't actually want to die, gives him a way out of his execution. Now, in order to get out of this death sentence, Gabimaru has to go to an island that's believed to be Shinsenkyo. Now, Shinsenkyo is a Japanese name for an ancient Chinese version of paradise, which is populated by immortal gods and mountain sages known as Seni, which is where we get the name Hell's Paradise. Now, it's revealed to us that criminals from all across Japan have been selected for this, and that these criminals will actually be accompanied by Asaimon escorts. That is to say that every criminal who goes to the Shinsenkyo will have an escort in the form of an Asaimon executioner, so they'll be in pairs. And I want to talk about the prisoners and the Asaimon who are sent with them, but first I gotta go a little bit further into the plot here. So on this presumed Shinsenkyo, there is a fruit that grants everlasting life. At least that's what the shogunate believes. The shogunate and Gabimaru believe that there's a fruit by the name of the Tokijuko fruit there that gives the elixir of life. And upon consuming this fruit, believed to look like a nectarine, one achieves immortality, which Gabimaru believes to exist because the village leader of Iwa is able to recover from any injury immediately, which has led everybody in Iwa and those who know of the village leader to believe that he's consumed the elixir of life. Now, this island is located where real-life Okinawa is, so significantly further south off the Japanese coast, and it was stumbled upon by accident. However, when the samurai stumbled upon it originally, they believed it to be heaven, as the entire island is covered in beautiful foliage. But it was soon revealed that it was not heaven, as the island, while covered in beautiful foliage, was also covered in a whole lot else, like butterflies with human faces that when they sting you, you turn into a flower monster, akin to what we see in The Last of Us. Miscreated loose approximations of Taoist and Buddhist gods slammed together that try to destroy everything that comes onto the island. Meters long centipedes that nip at your ankles as you walk through the woods. And every group of humans that went to this island looking for this elixir of life died. While this island is a paradise for the gods, it's not the Shinsenkyo, it's a Kutaka, a place where 7 immortal gods who used to be one god who reached enlightenment and then split into 7 separate personalities call home. And the island is a circle comprised of 3 portions. The outside circle is referred to as Eishu, while the second circle further in is referred to as Hojo, with the last circle being where the 7 immortal gods live being referred to as Horai. And it's revealed to us that this elixir of life exists in the last circle, Horai, and that in order to get to this elixir of life, you have to battle through all 3 circles, with every circle further in being filled with more dangerous enemies. See, the outside circle is filled with something called Soshin. Soshin are guardian deities. They're giant statues built in either Buddhist or Taoist form, or Buddhist and Taoist forms smashed together, and therefore they're meant to look like miscreated gods, a loose approximation of Buddhist and Taoist iconography, which is why many believe that this is Shinsenkyo, where gods reside, as these 30 to 100-foot statues represent Bodhisattvas and Buddhas and Taoist gods. Hojo, the second circle, is where we run into the Doshi. Now, while Soshin don't have any cognitive thought and can't communicate intelligently, Doshi are the right-hand men to the 7 immortals, who are referred to as Lord Tenzin, by the way. Now, the Doshi are very powerful because the Doshi are able to use Tao. And Tao is chakra, or Nen. It is a superficial energy force that exists in everything, humans very much included. And you can mold and form this Tao into ninjutsu. Now, while the Doshi and Lord Tenzin don't call it ninjutsu, Gabimaru does. And that's because Gabimaru and the Iwa Shinobi have been using it for as long as they've been alive. However, they didn't know it was Tao. They simply learned ninjutsu. So the real reason that the Doshi are considered powerful is because they're able to tap into an energy force that other people usually can't use. However, comparatively to anybody who can use Tao, the Doshi are not that strong. The real reason that being able to control Tao is so powerful in this universe is because Tao attacks are invisible unless you are tapped into Tao usage. And in that way, it's very similar to Nen. Now, probably the real reason that the Doshi and the Lord Tenzin don't call their Tao attacks ninjutsu is because they're kind of fundamentally different. See, the ninjutsu that Gabimaru uses manifests as kind of what we understand as ninjutsu from Naruto, except by and large, everybody really only gets one elemental release, and Gabimaru's is fire. See, Gabimaru is able to increase the temperature of his body to such a degree that he can light the oils on his skin on fire. This allows him to spit fire, throw fireballs, or just light everything around him on fire. And that is quite obviously visible. But the Doshi and the Lord Tenzin are able to fire Tao blasts, and these Tao blasts are entirely invisible. That is until, of course, you learn to read Tao, at which point you'll not only be able to see the Tao output of somebody, but also any Tao blast they shoot. However, this isn't the only thing that the Doshi and Lord Tenzin use. The Doshi specifically use Senjutsu, which for those of you who are Naruto nerds will know that it means sage jutsu, or a more accurate description would be nature-based jutsus. The Lord Tenzin can also use these techniques. Now, the way that this Senjutsu manifests is usually a massive physical transformation into a flower, or a butterfly, or a bunch of centipedes. It depends on what your nature affinity is. And obviously, this massive physical change is also visible to those who aren't tapped into Tao. But only those who are tapped into Tao will understand how to defeat these transformations, as attacking somebody who has mastered Tao without using your own Tao is like trying to build a 4-lane highway with a plastic shovel. Sure, you could do it, but it's gonna take longer than you have the energy for. And therefore, Tao is significantly closer to Nen than it is to Chakra, as not only can every Nen user see the Nen network and aura coming off of somebody else's body, which is an ability specific to those who have a Byakugan or a Sharingan in the Naruto world, but also Nen battles are determined by either who has more aura or who can apply their aura in a better spot. Now, the big difference between Nen and Tao, however, is that the usage of Tao is dangerous. See, Tao is the life force of everything, and therefore by expending Tao in order to attack people, you are expending your own life force. And therefore, the more Tao you use, the older you get. Now, I could talk for another 10 or so minutes about Tao, but like I said, that could be its own video. However, in order to reverse the aging effects of Tao, Tan was created. Tan is the supposed elixir of life, the thing that everybody in the show is after, and the thing that keeps the 7 immortal gods immortal. See, humans have been coming to this island forever. Well, at least for the past 1,000 years or so. Now, because in the fact that your average human can't use Tao and can't defeat a 50-foot tall statue, these humans are usually sacrificed to the flora of the island, but they have to be kept alive during this sacrifice. The gods of the island actually believe that this is a service to the humans that come to this island, as being taken over by the flora of this island leaves you in eternal bliss. It kind of puts you in a vegetative state where you have a smile on your face as flowers grow out of your face for the rest of time. But from this process of sacrifice sacrificing living people to the flora, a substance known as tan is created. And when you drink that tan, it not only gives you the ability to regenerate from any physical wound, but it also makes you younger, ensuring that you're able to use your Tao whenever and wherever you want. And tan is created and kept in Horai, the last circle of the island. And therefore, the real goal of Hell's Paradise is to kill the 7 immortals and get the tan. However, in order to accomplish that goal, not only do all of the criminals in the Asaimon on the island have to beat back the miscreated gods in the 7 immortals, they also have to worry about each other. See, this manga and anime is as close to a battle royale manga or anime you're really gonna get. I mean, obviously there is literal battle royale anime and manga, but Tomb is one of them. Still waiting on season 2, as only one criminal can get the pardon. And considering the fact the first wave of people onto the island brings 60 people, 30 criminals, and 30 Asaimon escorts, the criminals need to take each other out to guarantee that they'll be the ones to get the elixir of life, as only the person who gets the elixir of life and brings it to the shogunate gets the pardon. Which brings us to my favorite part of today's video, telling you about the key players of this story outside of Gabimaru. Obviously, Gabimaru and Sigiri are the protagonist and co-protagonist of the story. And while I adore both of them as characters, they are by far and away not the best characters in this story. The true beauty of Hell's Paradise is the amount of lovable and interesting and incredibly different characters that weave throughout the fabric of this story. See, my personal favorite character, and I can't believe I'm saying this because of how similar he is to Bakugo, is Chobi. See, Chobi is a well-known bandit leader, referred to as the Bandit King. Chobi is an absolute badass, whose superpower is his adaptability. See, Chobi is kind of a genius who can adapt to any situation as it's needed immediately. He was able to pick up Tao and master it simply by being hit by it a couple of times. Chobi and his brother Toma lost their parents when they were very young, and therefore they had to rely on a life of crime to keep themselves fed. However, unfortunately, one day they're cornered, and one day Chobi decides to hold off the people that are coming to arrest them so Toma can escape. However, only after Chobi made Toma guarantee that he would break him out of prison. See, Chobi is Toma's older brother and basically dictates everything that Toma does. And Toma is incredibly obsessed with Chobi, but they have a very cute brother relationship. In order to break his brother out of prison, Toma joins the Asaimon and becomes the fastest ever person to be fully approved to be an Asaimon, only taking 1 month. Upon becoming an Asaimon, he then goes to Chobi with the pardon offer of going to the island to find the elixir of life. And therefore, even though every other Asaimon on the island is there to keep the criminals in check and kill them if they try to run away, Chobi and Toma work together as a team because they're family. And honestly, they're incredible. Chobi is a badass criminal covered in scars head to toe, while Toma is one of the deadliest swordsmen in the entirety of the manga. Another very important character is Tamiya Gantetsusai. He is a master swordsman known as the Blade Dragon, and is also known as the 8 Provinces Unparalleled, meaning that in the 8 provinces around him in Japan, he was the greatest swordsman. He made friends with the daimyo in Japan, who also had a love for dragons, going so far as to have his daimyo crest be a dragon. However, one day while the two of them were drinking, the daimyo said that even the Blade Dragon wouldn't be able to cut a dragon, at which point Tamiya stood up, drew his sword, and cut the daimyo's gate in half, as at the top of the daimyo's gate was a dragon. Now, obviously, this dragon was made of wood, but you get it. And for intimidating and destroying the property of a daimyo, Tamiya was put on death row. Now, Tamiya is probably the closest facsimile we'll get to Kenpachi Zaraki in any other story outside of Bleach, as Tamiya doesn't want to go on this expedition to get pardoned or even to get immortality through the elixir of life. Tamiya is only interested in one form of immortality: becoming a legend. Tamiya believes that if he becomes the greatest swordsman on Earth and has legendary exploits on this island, that he will be known in the annals of history forever. His Asaimon escort is Fuchi. Fuchi is a sadistic little man. He's an incredibly rational thinker and a very powerful fighter, but he has an obsession with dissection. See, Fuchi is a very scientific mind, obsessed with understanding the biology of all living creatures, and usually that comes through the medium of dissection. Because him and Tamiya have such different goals, they butt heads a lot. But even with the penchant for dissection, Fuchi is one of the better characters in this manga. Outside of those two, another incredibly important duo is Neurogai and Tenza. See, Neurogai, out of all of the criminals, is arguably the most innocent. Neurogai is a 12-year-old girl whose only crime is belonging to a tribe that didn't live under the rule of the shogunate. Neurogai was raised amongst the Sanka mountain people, a hillside tribe that the shogunate considered Emishi. Now, the Emishi were considered rebels against the shogunate because they didn't live in cities or pay taxes. They were free people of Japan that lived in the woods and didn't apply to the outside laws of the governing bodies of the shogunate. Unfortunately for Neurogai, one day she stumbled upon a lost group of men who asked Neurogai Nurugai to lead them to her village so they could seek shelter. However, Nurugai realized her mistake when the samurai started slaughtering her entire clan, leaving Nurugai as the sole survivor of the Sanka Mountain people. However, for the grievous crime of being an amishi, she was put on death row, which is where Tenza, her Asaimon, found her. See, Asaimon believes in Nurugai's innocence, and therefore he wanted her to take on this mission so she could live on for the Sanka Mountain people. Nurugai is a complete and total badass. As somebody who grew up amongst the woods, she's incredibly understanding of how wild animals operate. She's also superhumanly strong for a 12-year-old girl, being able to slice the monsters on the island in half with little to no effort. And all of this is before she learns how to use Tao. However, quite honestly, in this duo, Tenza's kind of the MVP. Tenza is a relatively slow samurai. His whole gambit is that he's kind of stupid, but while mentally he might be a touch slow, he's one of the fastest swordsmen out of all of the Asaimon, being able to slash monsters into hundreds of tiny little bits in a matter of seconds. And because he believes in the innocence of Nurugai, he is very willing to put his life on the line to protect her. So much so that Nurugai actually ends up falling in love with him, which exists in a interesting little tidbit of legality considering she's 12, but he's 17, so they're both underaged. And for the first 15 or so chapters, Tenza was my favorite character. So you'll want to keep a close eye on these two because they actually are an awesome duo. And last and kind of least, at least in my opinion, when it comes to duos, we have Yuzuriya. Listen, she's some people's cup of tea, just not mine. Yuzuriya is a kunoichi, also known as a female ninja. However, she doesn't come from Iwa like Gabimaru, she comes from Keishu, which is a different shinobi village. And because she's also a shinobi like Gabimaru, she has a lot of the same abilities as Gabimaru. Knowing how to harden her body, use ninjutsu, wield a blade with deadly precision, she is an incredibly deadly woman. And when she was younger, she lived in that shinobi village with her younger sister, Saya. However, Saya died when she was young, and it's at that point that Yuzuriya swore that she would live on for the both of them, becoming a ninja who would be able to take whatever it is she wanted. And one of those things was a castle. And therefore, one night Yuzuriya broke into this castle and killed the retainers of it and took it for herself, which, believe it or not everyone loved. So eventually one day the castle was stormed and she was caught and put on death row, which is where the significantly better half of this duo comes in, her Asaimon, Senta. I love this man, mostly because he reminds me of me. Senta is the epitome of don't judge a book by its cover. He is the 5th strongest Asaimon out of the entire organization. And why you wouldn't be able to tell based off his appearance, as he's a relatively short, chubby man who wears glasses and is usually either tripping over things or sweating, Senta's real purpose in life is his study of theology. See, Senta didn't want to be an Asaimon. He actually wanted to be an artist. However, his family had a long-standing tradition of sending their children to study under the Yamada, the clan that creates all the Asaimon. And therefore, after realizing that he would have to become an Asaimon, he decided to abandon being an artist and simply throw himself into theology. And considering the fact that this entire manga takes place on what is supposed to be a holy land, having a theologist is incredibly important. The real reason that I love Senta is that he's basically the mangaka's way of throwing in exposition. As anytime an ancient Japanese name or a Buddhist or a Taoist iconography thing shows up, he's the one to explain exactly what it is, what it means, and how it ties into the story. His descriptions always make sense, they're succinct, and sometimes he ties a couple of them together to make a hypothesis. He's just like me. And without him, this entire manga would simply be word and name soup that nobody would understand. I've learned more about Taoism and Buddhism from him than I have from any of my own independent studies. Not to mention that he's the first person to truly put together a theory that this island isn't created by the gods, but is instead man-made, going so far as to call the island a miscreated mandala. He's the best. I love him so much. And while there is a bunch of other characters that pop up during the story, that's the main bunch you gotta worry about for the first 24 or so episodes. I am just now realizing that I completely skipped Sigiri. And considering the fact that she probably gets more character development than anybody in this entire manga, I probably should give her due diligence. So we've already covered the fact that Sigiri is the Asaimon for Gabimaru, but she's actually a lot more interesting than even just that. See, Sigiri is actually the daughter of the former leader of the Asaimon, Kijiji, and she's the only female Asaimon that we see. This is because in this time period in Japan, women were forced into more stereotypical tasks. Child rearing, cooking, cleaning, you get it. Though in the Yamada clan, it is a little bit different than that. While the women do absolutely do these things, they're more focused on supporting the Yamada clan from behind the male Asaimon, which means doing things like cleaning blades or collecting dead bodies for the male Asaimon to practice their executions on. Women or man in the Yamada Yamada clan, it's a pretty brutal life. And Sigiri doesn't love the idea of having her entire life embroiled in death.
So Nick, why did you become an executioner?
Well, the core tenet of Sigiri's character development is facing your problems head on. See, Sigiri believes that if she was to fulfill her role as a stereotypical woman and not become the executioner she currently is, she would be at some level denying the truth behind the Yamada clan. However, as an executioner, she's facing the truth of how bloody her life is and how embroiled in death it is head on. And not only is this tough for Sigiri, there's also the fact that all of the other Asaimon believe that she shouldn't be an Asaimon, with the majority of the Asaimon telling her to hang up her sword and go have children, her father being absolutely no exception to this rule. And therefore, Sigiri not only has to prove all of the men around her incorrect, she has to battle with her own inner demons as an executioner who really doesn't want to kill people. And therefore, her story is one of the most important and poignant in all of Hell's Paradise, as it's said that when she realizes her own potential and stops doubting herself, that she's stronger than even Gabimaru. And honestly, Sigiri is a really good representation of the core tenets of Hell's Paradise, as Hell's Paradise is about the acceptance of the darkness of humanity, as certain people like Sigiri and Gabimaru are faced with the worst humanity has to offer every single day. And unfortunately, that's part of their lives. But Hell's Paradise strives one step beyond this, saying that while you have to acknowledge the darkness of the world, you also have to find a way to find the beauty in it. You have to find the things worth fighting for and never lose sight of them. For Gabimaru, that's his wife. And for Sigiri, it's finding power and confidence in herself. To really boil down what Hell's Paradise is truly all about, it's accepting your own emotions instead of trying to hide them or destroy them. Even the tenets of learning Tao say you have to acknowledge your own weakness to get stronger, as strength is the fruit of weakness, and weakness is the seed of strength. All of the energy, all of the Tao in Hell's Paradise atones to yin and yang. The acknowledgement that all energy in the universe has light and darkness, strength and weakness, and that without our weaknesses, we would never know our strength. Hell's Paradise is a beautiful, violent, absolutely insane ride. And if you like Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, or Hunter x Hunter, you're gonna love this show. Now, you know everything you need to know for watching its first couple of episodes. So get out there and either watch the first couple of episodes or pick up the manga and tell me who your favorite characters are in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. That being said, just like with JJK or Chainsaw Man, don't get too attached to anybody.